Alright, what's up, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen? We're back with Commander 2014. The set's been completely spoiled. I said I might do a review. I like to review the new cards, especially when it comes to Commander 2014. That's what my channel's pretty much 99% about, so that's what we're going to go over. If you guys like these videos, let me know with a comment or leave a like so that I know you like them or you don't like them. I'm a little bit congested today, so you'll probably hear me sniffling. I apologize for that in advance. Some seasonal allergies which have not been taken care of by over-the-counter remedies, unfortunately, even though they're supposed to work. They don't always work. Just like any drug. Anyhow, I'm just going to go over all the white cards, and then I will tell you what artifacts are, because this isn't sorted by artifacts, and this is the best way to see the full pictures of the cards. So we'll start from the top, and then at the end we'll go over the artifacts and what I think about the deck in general. First card is a Docker Valkyrie. It's an older card. I think it's from Cold Snap. Snow Creature Angel. The snow thing isn't always that relevant. It's 5. Flying Vigilance for 4 and 2 white. So it's a 4 or 5 Flying Vigilance, and it has this ability that can reanimate creatures. So whenever another creature other than this dies, you can return it to the battlefield under your control. So you can attack with her. You can let your little guys die, and then you can reanimate them by tapping with her, so you can basically get double dip with her. She's okay. I think she could be played more than she is. She's kind of more of like a... Your opponent's going to want to play around this, so the effect is not always that powerful, because people just aren't going to play into it. And she just eats removal without much value. She just dies Doomblade, obviously, but she doesn't really hit the battlefield. Most cards in Commander that are really powerful have an enter the battlefield effect, or an immediate effect like something that draws you cards when you hit them, or let's see, Consecrated Sphinx that just draws cards on next upkeep. Obviously, he's crazy. Afterlife, destroy target creature, can't be regenerated. Put a 1/1 token onto the battlefield with flying. So this card is alright. It's not the best, but it is a white rule spell, and it just gets rid of the creature completely, and they get a 1/1 token. Not the worst, not the best. There's probably better options, and you probably shouldn't need to run this outside of the precon. I think the precons this time around are actually pretty good. I think they're a lot more focused than the old precons. I know I struggled with playing Derevi as a precon. It was really annoying to try and win against pretty much anybody, because the deck was just so... had ideas of untapping and tapping, and then it was basically split between the 3 legends they put into the deck. Like, it was trying to be Derevi, it was trying to be Ruin, and it was trying to be Rubinia, and none of them were all that great as one deck. So these ones definitely play as a single Commander deck, and you could actually move, I think, any of the legends into the legendary slot, and the deck would work pretty well. Moving on. Alright, so the first 2 of our new cards, these cards have not been printed before. They're both angels, which is got a little angel theme. I love angels, as you know. Angel of the Dire Hour, 5 white, 5/4, flash flying, a lot of F's there. 5/4, flash flying, I like that. When Angel of the Dire Hour enters the battlefield, if you cast it from your hand, exile all attacking creatures. So, yeah, it's good, but are you going to wait until your opponent's attacking with an Alpha Strike? Or are you going to just hold up 7 mana and then hope that someone attacks you? Or actually attacks anyone. So this is definitely something you think about in 4-player, because people are going to be attacking 1v1. I mean, if opponent's holding up 7 mana, which is a lot, and then you just don't attack, and then what are you going to do? Flash it in? And even then, the 5/4 body is not the best, but it's okay. I think it'll lead to some blowouts, but I don't think it'll be the most powerful card, especially at 7 mana. But it'll be fun to play with and play around as well. Angelic Field Marshal. So it's 2 white, flying angel it has base power and toughness 3/3, and whenever you have your commander on the battlefield, Angelic Field Marshal gets +2/+2, and creatures you control have vigilance. So it's kind of like a lord, but it boosts itself and then gives your creatures an ability like vigilance. So a 5/5 for 4 mana is okay. I mean, this is more of an aggressive deck, of course, but I don't think I'd play this outside the precon unless you just really like angels. Then yeah, it's pretty good. Plus, it requires you to have your commander on the battlefield. The keyword is pretty cool, Lieutenant. I think that's an interesting thing that they finally thought about, but I don't think this effect is that powerful. I'd rather run Hero Blade Hold, several other white cards that cost like a Myriad. I'd rather have a Myriad Angel before I had this. But this card's fine. Next, we have an old reprint Armistice, 3 white white enchant. Well, it's a 2 white enchantment, and you pay 3 white white, and you draw a card, and target opponent gains 3 life. I've never seen anyone ever cast this card. It is really expensive. It costs you pretty much your entire turn to draw a card and gain an opponent 3 life. Obviously, this can be more beneficial in multiplayer, where you can, politically, hey, don't attack me, I'll give you 3 life. Or, oh, my opponent's about to die, but I want to screw up the combat math for my opponent and gain that random person 3 life. Other than that, I wouldn't play this. There's just so many other, even in white, there's artifact draws like, Mind Stone, Staff of Nin. I mean, this is obviously repeatable, it doesn't require a tap or anything, but it's just way too expensive to be good. Next, we have a brand new card, a Benevolent Offering. This is part of a cycle of offerings from each color. You choose an opponent and you both get the effect. So it's got political ideas behind it. I like the art in this card, it's pretty nice. Kind of reminds me of Innistrad. Choose an opponent. You and that player each put 3 1/1 white spirit tokens onto the battlefield with flying. Choose an opponent. You gain 2 life for each creature you control, and that player gains 2 life for each creature he or she controls. I wouldn't play this outside of, I don't even know, a group hug deck. I just really wouldn't think this is very good. You're getting the same effect as an opponent, and you're spending a card, and the effect isn't that great for the mana costs. I mean, 3 1/1 white flying tokens. I'd rather just play Spectral Position, even if you're not gaining the life, unless you're just trying to gain a ton of life. That's another reason you could play it. But even then, in 1v1, this is pretty bad because you're basically giving yourself and your 1v1 opponent the same exact thing. And they get to attack you first. Moving on. I mean, maybe I'm just mean. I just don't like the symmetrical, like, oh, you give your opponents, like, New Frontiers. I remember with New Frontiers, that's the X spell for X and a green. Each player puts a basic land, X basic lands on the battlefield tapped. Shuffle your library. Whoever untapped after the person who cast that card, I've seen people cast like New Frontiers for like 7. The person who untaps right after just gets to spew their hand and just has a huge advantage, while the other 2 people on the board, especially the person casting it, is just so far behind. The only time that card is actually good is when people don't have a lot of basics, and then, yeah, that definitely punishes people. Other than that, I've just never seen it really be a fun card. It just blows people out really fast. Alright, Brave the Elements. It's a card we've seen before. I've pretty much never really seen it. It's fine, not really great. Combat tricks in general just aren't very great in Commander. You need to have something on the battlefield for it to even do anything. Cathar's Crusade. I like this card. I like it in Heliod. It's pretty nice. Your guys get pretty big pretty fast. Obviously works with that Benevolent Offering card we just saw. So whenever a creature you control on the battlefield you control, put a +1/+1 counter each creature you control, and 3 white for an enchantment. I like it. I don't know if it's good in this deck. This deck makes some tokens. The commander makes tokens, but we'll see. I mean, it's a fun card. I think you really need to be you have to have a commander in a deck that really wants this effect. If it's just a random white creature deck with like 2/2s and 4/4s, it's not so good. Alright, we're back with these 2 cards. Celestial Crusaders, a reprint from Time Spiral, 2 white, flash, split second, flying, other white creatures get +1/+1. That's pretty cool. It's a cool card. It's only a 2/2, which is definitely a bad thing, but if you have a lot of tokens, this is fine. It has to be white creatures, and it's not just your creatures, it's other white creatures. So if your opponent's playing white creatures, this will buff that. Split second's nice, flash is cool. It's fun to play with. I consider trying this card one day, but I don't think it's probably that great. And then this card is a new card. Prevent all damage. Come up in 3 and white. Instant. Prevent all damage will be dealt to you and planeswalkers you control this turn by sources you don't control. If damage from a creature source is prevented this way, this deals that much damage to that creature. If damage from a non-creature source is prevented that way, come up and deal that much to that source's controller. So basically, this is kind of a weird, like, interesting card where you can play like a fog effect, where your opponent bashes in with all their creatures, and you cast this, and in response, all their creatures end up killing themselves if they have the same power or higher power than toughness. And if they cast like a burn spell, you can prevent that damage. I mean, it might be fun to try. I don't know how great it will be. I think in general, these kind of cards, the white has effects like this. have never really been that great, but I don't know if this one is more powerful because it's 4 mana and just you can basically blow out your entire opponent's board if they alpha strike you. We'll see. Alright, so Condemn. Condemn is a great card. Pretty much any white that can play this. And that's all I'm going to say about it. Containment Priest. So here's the all-star for Constructed I'm seeing. It's a 1 white 2/2 human cleric creature with flash. If a non-token creature would enter the battlefield this turn and it wasn't cast, exile it instead. So it poses any kind of blink strategy, it hoses any kind of Green Sun Zenith, also Dryad Arbor coming off a land, a fetch land, Green Sun Zenith, Genesis Wave. So if you're playing in a meta game with a lot of your friends all playing like Genesis Wave and like, you know, tutoring creatures right onto the battlefield for free with Green Sun Zenith, or they have a Blink deck, or, you know, Reanimator, because Reanimator, you know, this poses that completely, Show and Tell. This is going to see play in Legacy, maybe Vintage. I'm sure it'll see play in Legacy. It hoses a lot of decks. And Commander, it'll be annoying, but I think the fact that it's a 2/2 makes it easy enough to remove, and it's just going to be annoying while you hopefully kill them. Hopefully you can kill this if you're hosting against it, so that way you can do what you want to do. And in some cases, that's going to do absolutely nothing. It's just going to be a 2/2 for 2, which is not that great. I will say, though, that this card will probably be the most expensive card in this deck. Maybe it might be, because it'll see play outside of Commander. Okay, Decree of Justice, card we've seen before. Expensive, usually you want to cycle it. If you want to make a lot of tokens, the card's obviously pretty good. Usually cycling is better than just casting it. It's pretty expensive to just pay 6 mana for a 4/4 flyer, and then it scales a little bit worse because then you're paying 8 mana, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 8 mana for 2 4/4s, and it starts to get a little bit better as you go along. But the cycling ability is nice, and you can ambush people with it. Deploy to the front, put X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens on the battlefield, or X's number of creatures on the battlefield. So if you have a lot of creatures, this is pretty good because you're just getting more guys. It's a sorcery. It's expensive. The art's very weird. It's like Portal, and you're in the random like field, and all these guys come out of nowhere. I don't think this will be that great. I think it's too situational to be good, but it could be cool. It could be cool, but I don't think it's. Okay, another new card, Fell the Mighty. Destroy all creatures with power greater than target creature's power. So if you have one big creature, which this deck doesn't seem like it wants to have one big creature, you destroy all creatures other than that creature. It is 5 mana, a little bit easier to cast than like the Wrath of God or Damnation, or Wrath of God or Day of Judgment. But it's more expensive and a little more conditional. Usually conditional wraths just aren't very good. That remains to be seen. I mean, this is just going to be a conditional wrath. Sometimes it'll be great, sometimes it'll be terrible. We'll see. Flicker Wisp. I've seen this card before, 1 white white. This works well with that Containment Priest that we just saw. Basically reads, you get to exile their creature and return to the battlefield at the end of I can't talk. Beginning of the next end step. But if that Containment Priest is on the battlefield, that creature just disappears forever. It's exiled. So that's interesting. Another thing about Containment Priest that'll be interesting is if you play it with Rune, even though Rune won't be good with your own creatures because you'll just, you're blinking your creatures, but with Rune, you can basically read, pay 2 mana, tap Rune, and then exile target creature. So I'm sure somebody's going to try that out with a new Containment Priest. It's a little janky, but it's still going to be pretty interesting to see what happens. So here we have 2 more reprints. Geist Iron Monk, the 3 white human monk. When it enters the battlefield, put 2/1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield, and its power and toughness are equal to the number of creatures you control, and has vigilance. I like this card. I think this card probably should be played more than it is. I think the problem is there's so many powerful creatures, in the format that this card is often overlooked. But it can be pretty good. I mean, it's pretty good with some of the cards we've seen, like Token Generators and Cathar's Crusade, obviously. So maybe this card will see some. Now that people have seen it again, they'll remember it and try and play it. Gift of States is also a reprint from Portal in 9th edition. If an opponent controls more lands than you, search your library for up to 3 planes, reveal them, and put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. So it's kind of like Tithe, but it doesn't have the clause. Well, basically it does nothing if you have more lands than your opponent, and you get 3 planes instead of 2, and it costs more mana and some sorcery. So, not the best card, but it's going to be fine way for white to generate some card advantage, also find lands. Alright, Big Daddy, Grand Abolisher. I love this card. That card is so annoying to play against, but it's so great when you have it because you know your opponents can't do anything. You have no idea how many times I've had Grand Abolisher on the battlefield with like when I was playing my Heliod deck, and I see my opponent is holding up mana on their turn, and I cast my Heliod or some other great creature or spell, and they like start tapping mana, and then they're like, oh, and then they untap it on a Magic Online, and they're like, you know that they just forgot about Grand Abolisher, so it can randomly blow people out that way. And also, you can't use artifacts, creatures, or abilities because, like kiki-jiki, you can't just use the ability on their turn. You have to do it on yours. So that's pretty nice. Then we have Hallowed Spirit Keeper, another card people say might be good. When this dies, put X1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So I think like more of a Reanimator style like deck is going to want this, if at all, if there's even room for this card. It's only a 3/2, it does have Vigilance, and it does give you some value, but I don't think it's going to be that great. I think it's just okay. And a card you might just find fun. And you want to make tokens. And now we have cats. How fitting both the cats. Both legends are in alphabetical order in this deck. So we have Jazal Goldmane, 2 white, brand new card, legendary creature, Cat Warrior, 4/4, first strike, pay 3 in white, attacking creatures you control get +X until end of turn, where X is the number of attacking creatures. He could probably be pretty good in a lot of different decks, like Risk the Redeemed, any kind of token strategy like Hazes on Tamar, or like Heliod even. You know, you just dump a bunch of mana to Heliod's tokens and then just, you know, overrun them. Which is pretty cool. The thing is, you do have to attack. You can't use this defensively. Oh no, you can. If they're attacking you with a bunch of creatures, that counts for his ability. I don't know if he might see some kind of like play as a commander. I'm sure people will try him out, and I think people will kind of realize he's just kind of slow and clunky, and they'll probably just substitute him for more powerful mono-white generals. But people will try him out. He'll be full, and he's fine as one of 99 in the deck. We have Kemba, so we have an equipment theme, and we have a token theme, and Kemba kind of covers both bases. 2/4, 1 white, legendary creature, Cat Cleric, and at the beginning of your upkeep, put a 2/2 white creature token on the battlefield for each equipment attached to Kemba. So if you just Voltron Kemba, you start to get really big, and then you get a lot of cats, which can overwhelm your opponent pretty quickly. I'm sure you guys have seen Kemba before, and are kind of aware of what you can do, but I think it's actually pretty good in this deck. Alright, so Core Sanctifier is a card that I like to play in mono white because it does have the ability to destroy an artifact or enchantment. Most of the white creatures who enter the battlefield can only hit an enchantment. The one downside is he is a little expensive, and you can't blink it. Like, you can't, put this from the graveyard and kill an enchantment, or you can't, like, cast a momentary blink or something like that and then destroy another artifact. It has to be cast with Kicker in order to get the effect. So that's one downside. And then we have Marshal's Anthem. 2 white, multi-kicker of 1 white. Creatures you control get +1/+1, so it's an Anthem effect, obviously. And then we have a clause where, when this enters the battlefield, we're going to turn up the X target creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the number of times it's been kicked. I've never seen this card played a lot. I've seen it once in a while, and it's been okay that, you pay 6 mana and you get +1/+1 and you get a creature back, but I've never really tried it, so I'm not really sure how to evaluate it. I think it's just very expensive. But if you're playing Reanimator, obviously this is something you could do. Martial Coup, another reprint that's very solid. You wrath the board, you pay 7 mana at least, and you get at least 5 tokens, and you destroy all the other creatures. I like this card, and if you really need to, you can make a couple of tokens. Like if you need a Skull Clamp to draw cards, you can just make 2 tokens, and then Skull Clamp, which is in this deck, can just start drawing cards off those tokens. Plus, it works nicely with all the token effects. Mentor of the Meek, another great card. Sees criminally low amounts of play. That just, once you start this thing going, it just gets a lot of card advantage. So whenever the other creature with power 2 or less on its battlefield, you may pay 1 and draw a card for a 2/2 for a 2 and a white human soldier. I love that card. That card is so good. Remember this card in Innistrad Limited, which is so backbreaking. If you cast it turn 3, you just start chaining off creatures. That green-white human, green-white aggressive deck, that deck was so insanely good in Triple Innistrad. One of the best decks. And this is still a good card, I just don't see it played very often. 2 more reprints, Midnight Haunting, Mobilization. So they both cost 2 and a white. One's instant. Put 2 1 spirit creature tokens with flying out of the battlefield. Mobilization is enchantment. So Midnight Haunting is a little bit worse than Lingering Souls, but you can't play Lingering Souls in mono white deck because it has a black flashback. But this is an instance, so it's a little bit different, but I think if you're going to play tokens and you need this kind of effect, you would just play Lingering Souls or maybe Spectral Possession. I don't even know if Spectral Possession's in the deck. I haven't looked that far. It probably is. Then we have Mobilization. Soldier creatures have Vigilance, which it's not that great in this deck, and then you can put one white soldier tokens on the battlefield. So there's a lot of mana-heavy effects like that you can pay into your enchantments or your creatures, which I think this deck is going to definitely want a lot of mana if you're going to play it just the way it is. You're going to often find you can either cast a creature or you can equip a creature with a token or with an equipment, or you can use your ability to draw cards, or you can use this ability to draw cards with and make a token with like Mentor of the Meek. So it's definitely going to be strapped for mana, I'm pretty sure, even though it's a white deck, which generally has a low curve. Alright, here she is in all her glory. Nahiri, the Lithomancer. That's the general, the faceplate of this deck. It costs 3 white for a Planeswalker called Nahiri. And put a 1/1 course for a +2 ability. She starts with 3 loyalty. Put a 1/1 core soldier creature token onto the battlefield. You may attach an equipment you control to it. So you don't get to tutor for an equipment, but if you have like an expensive equipment, you can just give it to that token for free. Obviously, that token does not have haste, but it is a good effect to have. And then you can -2 and put an equipment card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield. That's kind of a nice ability because if you have something that got blown up, you can just bring it back. And then next turn, equip it for free if you need to. And then -10. So you're going to have to activate this up for 5, 7, 9, 11. So that'd be 4 turns later, and then 5 turns later you could ultimate it. But it is nice that she goes up +2 and not +1. Put a colorless equipment artifact token named Stoneforge Blade onto the battlefield. It has indestructible, equipped creature, gets +5/+5, and has double strike and equip 0. I mean, the ultimate is one of the weakest ultimates, I think, of all the new Planeswalkers they spoiled, or that they're printing. And I feel like they kind of just phoned it in with this thing. Like, yeah, she makes a big sword that you can kill your opponents with. But if you've been making this many tokens, like with Elspeth, the 2 white Elspeth, if you're ultimating her, like, you just almost can't lose because all of your things are indestructible. This is like, you made a big sword. Like, it's not really what you want. I mean, if you've got all these tokens, I don't know. I'm just not impressed by the ultimate. I think the +2 ability is fine. Like, you can just play that in any like blue-white control deck, any kind of control deck, any token deck, because it just makes a token, and then the other stuff is just kind of gravy. I mean, the minus isn't that great if you're not playing a lot of equipment, obviously, and the -10 is just fine. We'll see how she does. I think she'll be okay, but I think she's kind of the most boring of all the other generals. She's just kind of what we've seen already, and nothing is really new other than reanimating an equipment. Or basically, she has a Stoneforge ability where you have to put an equipment onto the battlefield, or you can reanimate it. So she's like a cross between Stoneforge Mystic and Elspeth. Obviously, she draws those comparisons, and she actually looks just like Stoneforge Mystic's original art. If you look at the art, she's wearing the same kind of clothes, same haircut, and she even has that kind of Stoneforged Blade. I think they're kind of part of the same tribe of the core, and that's the whole story behind it. I haven't read that deeply into it. And then Nobad's Assembly. This is a card from Zendikar block. Put a 1/1 core soul. I can't even talk today. I'm so sorry, guys. Put a 1/1 white core soldier creature token on the battlefield for each creature you control and has rebound. So obviously the first time you can cast it, it might not be that great, but then if you rebound it next turn, it can get out of hand. We'll see what happens with this card. This card's fine, but I think I just wouldn't play this unless you really, really, really want to just play token. Alright, 2 more reprints. Oblations, obviously, you've probably seen this card cast. It tucks generals, tucks pretty much any kind of non-land permanent. It's sort of like a Chaos Warp, but instead of putting a random, whatever the top card of your library is onto the battlefield, that person draws 2 cards. And there are some decks that really cannot function well without their commander. Like Kiki-jiki can, but like he loses so much steam when you tuck him. When I first started playing Kiki-jiki, this card pissed me off so much because you end up playing a lot of kind of mediocre cards to make Kiki-jiki good. Like you play like Avalanche Riders or Solemn, but you get so much value if you can copy those cards. And then for any general that just cannot function, or any deck that can't function without this general or a certain permanent, this obviously is insane. But the drawback is real. Drawing 2 cards, giving your opponent card advantage is something you need to consider when you cast this. I feel like a lot of people just slot Oblation into their deck when they really don't need to be doing that, like white-black deck or blue-white deck. You just have so many options that you really don't need to be playing Oblation unless you just really want to screw your opponents over by tucking their general. Moving on. Requiem Angel, 5 is an expensive angel, 5 in white. For 5/5 flying, whenever another non-spirit creature you control dies, put a 1/1 white spirit. Interesting effect, I just think it's too expensive, and I mean, you're gonna, if your big guy dies and you get a 1/1, is that really that great? I mean, makes combat a little bit harder for your opponent, but just for 6 mana, you want to be doing other things like Sun Titan. Alright, Return to Dust. Oh, it just moved this thing down without pausing. Sorry about that. This is one of my favorite cards, or one of the best cards, I think, in Commander for white enchantment or artifact removal. So it's 2-way white instant, exile target artifact or enchantment. If you cast a spell during your main phase, you may exile up to 1 target artifact or enchantment in addition to that. So you can exile 2, either or, in any kind of mix. So I think this is from Future Sight or Time Spiral. It's a shifted version of Dust to Dust. I don't know if they printed like a time shift version of Ashes to Ashes. Or maybe they did. So that card read you had to exile 2 enchantments, or 2 enchantments and or artifacts. So this one lets you target when there's only 1. So if you just want to get rid of your opponent's Mimic Vat or Soul Ring, you could do that. But with Dust to Dust, you needed to hit 2 things no matter what. Otherwise, you couldn't use it, which made it slightly less flexible. And this card's awesome. I think almost every white deck in Commander wants this effect, unless you're some kind of combo heavy thing where you just don't care what your opponent's doing and you're just trying to just score and beat them without caring about what they're doing. And then Sacred Mace's reprint with different art, I'm pretty sure. Yep. 2 and a white for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this unless you sacrifice a Pegasus. Put a 1/1 white Pegasus with flying onto the battlefield. So you basically have to sink 2 mana a turn into this, or you're just going to lose it. And at that point, you have invested 5 mana for basically nothing. Obviously, it's better late game where you can just sink a ton of mana, but this is one of those cards, like I said, there's a lot of effects in this deck that just eat your mana. So if you have Sacred Mace, if you've got the 3-white white draw card, you've got, the new Cat Legend, and your equipment that you want to equip, this is going to get really tough to use all those abilities. So you're going to have to kind of cut and trim and see what you want. But I've seen people play it, and it's been fine, but I've never been impressed by it, so I'd probably just cut it if I could. Okay, so now we have Sarah Avatar, which 4 white for an Avatar. Its power and toughness equal your life total, and when it's put into the graveyard from anywhere, shuffle into a library, which doesn't let you reanimate it, but also stops other people from reanimating, and it gives it back to you if you draw it again. This card is cool, but it's never been really that great. I've never really seen anyone play Sarah Avatar and really do a lot of work with it. I mean, it does get chump blocked. If you can give it flying or evasion of some kind, obviously it's better. Or if you just fling it at your opponent, if you're playing a red-white deck, that gets pretty great. But I mean, if you like life gain, then you can definitely play this card. I mean, it can be a 7 mana 40/40, or even more or less. Then we got Silverblade Paladin, another great card in an aggressive deck. He works well. I think he works well in decks like Daxos or some commander that's focused on attacking and getting effects when it hits people. Even then, it still can be pretty hard to deal with. We gotta be wary of blowouts where you attack, a 3/3 or a 4/4 into their 4/4 or 5/5, expecting to trade or to win battle, but then they blow you out by killing the paladin and blocking your guy favorably and winning that way. So he's a little bit different than Mirren Crusader, which they left out of this deck. I think they didn't want to they didn't want to give the white deck just a card that the green deck or black deck just couldn't interact with, and they gave him this instead. Alright, another double striking beast, 1 white cat knight, flying double strike, even though you can't see that there's a cat on that back of that dragon thing. So 1/1 flying double strike, and you're going to need equipment for this to be good at all. I mean, you're just not going to want to play. You're not going to want to play this just randomly unless you have a lot of equipment. Even then, it's kind of okay. Then we have Spectral Possession, which is a hybrid mana, either colorless and white or colorless and white and colorless and white, where you put 3/1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield. So if you have a quick start with Soul Ring, you can substitute one of those white manas for 2 colorless, which makes it more flexible in multicolor decks. And mono white generally it's going to be white. But there are some colorless utility lands where you're going to be a little bit screwed for white mana, and this will help. You can cast it a little bit more easily. Alright, so you have Sun Titan and Sunblast Angel, both 4 white creatures. Sun Titan's a giant and has vigilance, and he's a 6/6. He's part of the Titan cycle. Whenever he Enters the battlefield or attacks, you may return target permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard onto the battlefield. Obviously, he's a great card. He's one of the most powerful guys of the Titans in Commander because he can do some cool stuff. With Oblivion Rings, gets you back fetch lands, gets you back strip mine, gets you back anything with 3 or less, like a creature that you might want to get back, and I love this guy. He's pretty great. And Sunblast Angel, you have no idea how many times I actually had to play around this card because you just never know, because your opponents could be playing anything. And there's been so many times where I've attacked or used kiki-jiki on my turn, and then my opponent plays Sunblast Angel and just kills everything. And I'm just like, oh god, it's so debilitating because they now have a 4/5 Angel, and you have nothing. A card that could see more play, but it generally doesn't for whatever reason. I think people have forgotten about it, and I mean sometimes it's not, the effect isn't there because nothing you can do. And I've also seen people attack and then cast Sunblast Angel and kill their own creatures and basically like, oops, shouldn't have done it that way. So watch out for that as well. Alright, True Conviction. Another fun card to play with. 3 white, white, white. I like to play this in Heliod because it gives more devotion and the effect is nice. It is expensive, so you're not going to just want to throw it and everything. And it should be good in this deck. We'll see. I mean, giving 1/1s and 2/2s double strike and lifelink isn't the best, but it's still pretty powerful. Then we have Twilight Shepherd, 3 white, white for 5/5 Flying Angel with Vigilance. When this enters the battlefield, return to your hand all cards to your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn. It has Persist, so it comes back if it dies with a -1/-1 counter. And has its effect again. So it's a card that's pretty awesome. It works well with token decks. Like I think Gabe can sacrifice creatures. It can sacrifice all its permanents. Like you can blow people out with balance and do all sorts of crazy things if you really want to try. Obviously, balance is not legal in Commander, but restore balance, and there are other things that do similar effects. The fine card, I've never really seen it cast much, but when it's been cast, it's always been kind of annoying. All right, White Sun Zenith. X white white white. Put X 2 white cat creature tokens onto the battlefield, and then shuffle this back into your library. It's a good finisher, otherwise it's kind of expensive and clunky. It's a nice effect to have, especially with tokens if you want to run a token theme. And a card that, I don't know, I've never really seen it cast all that much. Once in a while you'll see it. I've seen some decks, like white-black decks, that literally play no creatures. They only play token makers and control cards, and this is another one that's good for that. Then White Mane Lion, it's a 1 white cat, another cat card. 2/2 flash, and when this enters the battlefield, return a creature you control to its owner hand. The idea of this is you can kind of ambush a small creature, or you can return a creature that has value. You can blink, but you can return back to your hand and then use it again, or save something from a removal spell. Not really seeing it do much. It's obviously a reprint as well. Alright, we're back with the last card of the white deck that's not an artifact or land. Wing Shards. Wing Shards is 1 white white for an instant. Target player sacrifices an attacking creature. It's a card that can blow people out pretty bad. You attack a bunch, you cast a bunch of equipments or things that buff things, and there's a lot of hexproof generals, and the Wing Shards can just blow someone out. They have to sacrifice 3 or 4 creatures, and it only costs 3 mana. It has Storm, so you get to copy it for each spell that was cast before it this turn. And I've gotten blown out by this card once in a while, but it rarely gets cast. I think you'll see it more now. So let's talk about the lands and the artifacts. Let me pull up what they are, and then we'll talk about them. Okay, so these are the colorless cards and the lands. We'll go over them really quick. It's been a long video. If you're still listening to us, we have Skull Clamp, Soul Ring, Marble Diamond, which is a 2-mana artifact that enters the battlefield taps for white mana. Mask of Memory, Pearl Medallion, Swiftfoot Boots, Locks and Warhammer, Strata Scythe, Sword of Vengeance, Bonehorde, Moonsilver Spear, and Margentum Armor. So, what do I think about this deck? And then we have the lands, Myriad of the Sky Ruin, Ghost Quarter, Karoo, Secluded Steppe, Temple of the False God, 32 Plains, and no Drifting Meadow. It's funny because Wizards' website actually classified Drifting Meadow with a typo. It was under Other. Probably because they made a typo in their own official announcement, which is kind of funny. So, Skull Clamp, probably an all-star in this deck that makes so many tokens. It's probably what you want to get if you can get it out early as possible. Does some ramp. Not enough ramp. You're only running 32, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, 38 lands. Not a lot of ways to ramp and a lot of mana-hungry abilities. The think the deck is more of a battle cruiser. You know, the games are going to lead to battle cruiser style Magic, where you're playing kind of slow early decks, and then you kind of get your big angels and some equipment and so on, and you start to hit each other. I think all the decks are going to play that way. I know the blue deck has like a 9 mana, 8 mana, 7, several of each of those converted mana costs, creatures, and spells. So the games are going to be slower if you play them stock. It's probably one of the more aggressive ones because it can make a lot of tokens, but they're just so mana hungry. And, I mean, the equipments are all fine. Obviously, you look at a card like Moonsilver Spear, which is like 4 to equip, 4 to cast. Archon of March was like 6 to equip, 6 to cast. Very expensive. And they have Swiftfoot Boots instead of Lightning Greaves, which, I mean, Lightning Greaves is better. I mean, Swiftfoot Boots might be better in this deck because it has so many equipment, but other than that, I don't think so. So then we have the lands Myria. I would run Myria in any mono white deck that plays creatures. Ghost Quarter. They probably included Ghost Quarter instead of like Tech Edge because there's not a lot of non-basics since we're playing all, you know, monocolored decks here. Secluded Steppe, Cycling Land, and Drifted Meadow, another Cycling Land that costs 2 colorless, and then a Temple of the False God. So all in all, I don't know if I want to do all of the reviews. I just want to see how this one goes. I think my favorite of all the decks might be the red one. I think the red one's the most fun because it has a lot of cool effects. This one's, I think, the most kind of straightforward and linear. You know, just make tokens, attack with tokens, and then have effects that work well with tokens, like equipment and, you know, some couple of anthems and things of that nature. So let me know what you guys think of the deck. Which one are you most excited for? If you had to pick one, which would you like to see a review of? I mean, all the information's out there. This isn't anything breaking or new in the last, you know, week and a half. So maybe I'll bring you a gameplay. Maybe I'll do one tonight. And I hope you guys have a great day. I've been very busy. I feel like I've not had time to relax in a while. So that's why I have about a half an hour. Wow, it's been almost 40 minutes now. Have a great day, guys. It's nice, you know, being able to talk to you guys. And we'll have to go more into some stories when we have more time. Hopefully my congestion, it sounds like it's relieved itself. The Benadryl's kicked in, but that's probably why I couldn't talk, because the Benadryl makes you kind of, it impairs your cognition. It definitely does. So